Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I'm joined today with Jeffrey Augustine. How's it going, man?
Great. How are you doing, Aaron?
Doing excellent. So I wanted to talk to you today because you have launched a new YouTube channel. You've been running Surviving Scientology for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to show everyone your new channel, the Scientology Money Project YouTube channel. So Jeff, we got to see how many subscribers we can get by this time tomorrow. Okay. I'm guessing 1,500 new ones. Okay. That's my guess. So literally what did you made this public? Was it yesterday morning or this morning?
This morning.
Just this morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, regular viewers of my channel will recognize the Scientology Money Project title from your blog, the Scientology Money Project. We're going to come back. I'll show this channel again in a second. From your blog, where you talk about, you kind of document Scientology's financial crimes and Scientologists' financial crimes, and not just financial, all the crimes and the lawsuits and the cases of Scientology and Scientologists. Is that going to be what this YouTube channel is about as well?
Yeah, it's going to. So two things. First, Surviving Scientology, my wife, Karen De La Carriere, started that in 2012. And that's a great channel. She does a lot of interviews, but we have a lot of archival material that's hard to find because a lot of stuff's gone down off the internet. So I began my blog, the Scientology Money Project, in 2014 to cover Scientology crimes, lies, legal matters. And so now there's more I can do. Sometimes it's easier to explain it to people on a YouTube video than to have too long didn't read posts. Because I can get very analytical. So I wanted to do, I was inspired by the success of your channel. Sometimes I can get faster breaking stories using YouTube. So it just became smarter. And I have so much archival material that I want to present in blogs, like how the Church of Scientology is really constructed, what it really is. The big story I launched on in 2014, there were then obscure IRS forms that had just become public. Churches didn't have to release them before. My big thing I opened in 2014 with was $1.5 billion in Scientology assets on IRS Form 990s.
Interesting.
And then it started, Aaron, when you ask questions like, what is Scientology? That can be answered a lot of ways, but I wanted a very exact answer. Because if you ask Scientology, they'll say, what is a Scientologist? It's someone who studies and applies the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard. Well, yes, but can I walk into the org and give them $1.5 million for my bridge? No, you have to join the IES, which is an unrelated legal corporation. You have to sign these 3 contracts. You have to do a SEC check. You've got to do, you know what I mean? So I want to know what it really is. Because when David Miscavige here in LA, he's the little guy who's running from subpoena. Run, Dave, run. I wanted to show people what it really is. So that's what I do. And now that some stories are getting ready to break, like the GPB Capital holdings run by Scientologist David Gentili, that's going to go to criminal trial likely in the next few months.
Excellent.
That's why I want to have some live blogging, and then we can do live streams and cover it because that's going to be a big case, and it's going to be interesting to see where it leads.
Yeah. So I think, wait, I'm trying to get this back on. I think having a channel where you can, as you choose to, either go live with breaking stuff that's easier to discuss than it is to write about, or sometimes, I guess when you're taking the time to write, it's easy to lay everything out and make sure you're connecting all the dots and everything. But sometimes you just want to be able to explain it to someone, because someone's more likely to listen to a 5-minute explanation than they are to read 5 minutes worth of material. Correct. And I thought it was really hilarious that your debut video on this channel was essentially a breakdown of L. Ron Hubbard's story about Xenu and his space planes and how it would be physically impossible. I listened to the whole thing today. It cracked me up. It must have taken you a long time to put this video together.
It did, because, I used a program called Filmora, but I wanted to have some fun with it. I want to really have some fun, Aaron, because people may not know it, but I have a satire blog called ot8isgreat.com. And I started that because sometimes when you report on Scientology, some stuff is just tragic and sadistic and monstrous. And other stuff about Scientology is absurd and nonsensical. And sometimes you don't know whether to laugh or cry, right? So this one, I'm kind of doing a fusion where it's always interested me because you spend all the money to get, you have to be invited onto the OT levels. And this is another misunderstanding. You can't give the church $1 million and just walk in and say, hey, I want to do the OT levels. I mean, it takes years and years to go clear, and you got to do your clear certainty rundown, and you got to do your OT preps, and you have to be invited onto the OT levels. Aaron, could you explain to Scientology watchers or listeners, like what it means, what does it mean to be invited onto the OT levels?
Yeah, so just the very fact that it's even an invitation, that's Scientology's way of positioning themselves above you, no matter what you've given them, no matter how much time or money or years of service you've given them. The positioning is, it is a privilege, not a right, to do the OT levels. You will only receive an invitation once we have determined that your case has been set up correctly and you have met our ethical criteria. Even then, you're not entitled. You shall receive an invitation. And it's actually a really big deal. It's a really big deal to receive that invitation.
It will be bestowed upon you. Jumping ahead just for a minute, OT8, and this is another, the bridge, Scientology's bridge to total freedom or total insanity goes up to OT15. But with L. Ron Hubbard dying, it stops at OT8, right?
Yeah.
And I've read stories of people on the ship. It's only delivered on the Apollo, right?
We talked about the free winds.
Yeah, the free one. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I was thinking of the earlier Scientology barge. So the free ones,
the cattle ship.
Yeah, I've heard stories of the free ones where the OT8 invitation is slipped under your door and you awake in there. So, okay, now why I wanted to do OT3 because the Xenu stories always fascinated me.
Yeah.
And I have a sales, technical sales background where I did a lot of engineering and physics. I'm not a degreed engineer. I'm not a nuclear physicist like Hubbard, but I'm very conversant with physics and I really like it. So I wanted to approach it in a really different way. And I wanted to break it down in a way that's never broken down because I'm a private investigator. After I left corporate, I worked my way to become a PI. So I thought, let's go back through the case again to see what was missed on the whole story of Xenu and the BTs. So,
and also people may not know, Jeffrey, you're somewhat of a religious historian. I mean, at least when it comes to Christianity, I don't want to you really are. You're kind of an expert in the field.
Yeah, I grew up in church. Thank you. Attended a Christian university, and I've studied a lot. And then what I wanted to do, I've done about 90 podcasts, and I quit podcasting for a while, but I've done interviews with some people who are no longer with us. Former high-ranking Scientologists. I've interviewed you in the past, and people who are just out. I interviewed Bill Franks, former executive director, Scientology, International. So I wanted to get those historical podcasts. And the history of religion really interests me, and the history of Scientology, especially from people who are in it, is very valuable. So that was part of it. And Hubbard's creation of the OT levels, there was L. Ron Hubbard never explained how he created the OT levels, where it came from.
It's true.
He didn't say, because obviously there's no God there, so it can't be divine revelation. And so he wrote them in when he was in Las Palmas in a rented villa. And I know I'm going to do a future podcast where I explain more, but for now I wanted to just take a look at it in terms of, has anything been missed? And I found like the key thing for me anyway that satisfied why body thetans are impossible. Why, in order to have body thetans, you'd have to violate one of the fundamental laws of physics. That we can get into now. I think that would be interesting for your listeners to hear.
Sure. And so, yeah. Well, and so just to remind everybody here, I'll click on this thing.
Warning. This video contains a beta and is made by an SP.
Yes.
Can you actually hear that?
I can hear it.
Oh, wow. I wasn't trying to make it that way. Anyway, the name of this video is Scientific Proof That Scientology's Body Thetans Cannot Exist. Now, I want to say right off the bat, some people might think that Xenu and the body Thetan story and bringing over, blowing up people in the volcanoes with the hydrogen bombs and this story, that it's an allegory. And I think it's important for people to understand Scientologists aren't expected to think this is an allegory.
Exactly.
Right? Scientologists are expected to believe that this is real, historical fact. So when Jeff breaks down in this video how L. Ron Hubbard's story of how Xenu transported these billions or even trillions of people from the planets in the other planets in the Galactic Confederation and flew them over in DC-8 space plane DC-8 space planes, right? And blew them up here. You are expected to believe that this is something that physically was possible in the real world.
Oh yeah, Hubbard was not fooling around. This was Hubbard said that there was an incident that happened 75 million years ago, and it holds the entire everyone on the planet they're trapped by this incident, and until you learn what this incident is and how to eradicate it, you're trapped.
Right. So I want to address a few of the main themes in your video, and one of which is that L. Ron Hubbard says on OT3 that Xenu and his crew, his fleet of airplanes loaded with these people. It's not entirely clear to me, Jeff, whether the Xenu story is supposed to describe boxing up trillions of bodies or Thetans, but we're going to touch on that in a second, okay? The story is that Xenu and his fleet of airplanes flew all these people to Earth in 9 weeks, and that this would have required faster than light space travel.
Correct.
Now, I'm going to start out by saying Scientologists would tell you that they do believe alien civilizations are capable of faster than light travel.
Yes.
Now, they haven't necessarily thought deeply about that, but any Scientologist would tell you, of course, alien civilizations are capable of faster than light travel. How else do you think they would have gotten here?
Yeah, well, this is where it's become self-referential. It's a tautology. It's circular logic. Basically, Hubbard, there's a secret briefing that was leaked online. It's out there. And Hubbard said that 75 million years ago, there were as a confederation of 76 planets. And each planet had on average 176 million people. Let me get to my post on it, okay?
Billion people, right?
Billion, I'm sorry, yes. 176 billion people. And I just have to go to look. I just have to get the numbers.
So these would have to be massive planets to have an average population of over 150 or 175 billion people.
Well, yeah, that's the point I make in my video, is that each planet, and I'll get the numbers here. Okay, each planet had on average. Oh, actually, I put it on a PowerPoint. I might put on live. Each planet had a massive population. I think 176 billion.
Okay.
And I worked the numbers out to 15.3 trillion people.
Right.
And so L. Ron Hubbard says that Xenu was unelected as the supreme ruler. He said supreme ruler. But before he did that, he called people in for a tax audit, and he zapped them with a mixture of glycol and alcohol, and he trapped them. So he said he trapped them, transported them to Earth. And Xenu had exact copies of DC-8s. So that's, in terms of engineering, that's our baseline reference that Hubbard said. Okay, each planet has a population of 178 billion people. So 76 planets times 178 people gives you 13.538 trillion people. And Hubbard said these societies were decadent, kicked in the head, very much like the 1950s. So his
Yes.
baseline is these are human-like people, or humanoids.
Scientologists are just supposed to not think too deeply about the fact that these ultra advanced alien civilizations just happen to look exactly like the 1950s world that L. Ron Hubbard grew up in, and that don't think too much. Don't think too hard about that.
No, and this is where when you get into engineering, look, when I was, I worked on lasers, spectrum analyzers, spectrophotography, all kinds of things, right? So I always had to work with hardware, and anyone hardware, software problems. So this is the baseline. Hubbard said Xenu used exact copies of DC-8s, which were a 4-engine jet. In the 60s, they were kind of replaced by the Sub-47. And so that's what we're going to look at. I wanted to look at, like, what would it really take to do this, to take trillions of people across light years of space and dump them in Earth. So it's an exercise in engineering. It's like I said in the video, it's like challenging the idea of Noah's Ark.
Right.
Like, one of my questions when I was a kid, reading the Bible, a good little church boy, I thought, how could you get sloths from South America over to the Middle East? How would they migrate? Animals, that were like polar bears who were built for cold weather, how could they get to the Middle East where Noah's Ark was? How does that happen, Aaron? So I'm using the same kind of inquiry. I'm going to take Hubbard at face value, and we're going to engineer it. Could DC-8 space planes go 433 light years? And so I begin with the basic problems and, take it from there.
Right. Now, so let me just give a thought on this. I know L. Ron Hubbard said Xenu's space planes were exact copies of the DC-8. It would be more like literarily correct to say the DC-8s were exact copies of the space planes, considering the space planes came 75 million or billion years earlier, right? So
you're correct, yeah.
So could we say, and of course, Xenu's, civilization's technology would be far more advanced because clearly they're also capable of faster than light space travel. And so, I'm given the assumptions that L. Ron Hubbard is making, right?
Well, no, because he says they're exact copies, but they didn't have fans or jet engines. So we're assuming rockets. I mean,
okay. So, but we acknowledge that L. Ron Hubbard's story implies, whether he states it or not, that they would have to be capable. They would have to be capable of faster than light travel.
I don't think Hubbard thought that through to that level.
Okay.
Perhaps it's presumptive.
I'll tell you why I think he did.
Yeah.
So because of the Mission Earth series of books that he wrote with Jedro Heller as the hero, and
Yes.
Jedro Heller was the spaceship that he used was called Tug 1, and it had these engine warp drives called the Wilby Was time drives. And so and L. Ron Hubbard sort of said he never wrote a word of fiction in his entire life. He was just writing from his whole track recalls. So, here he has this Mission Earth decology where all of these alien civilizations have faster than light travel as just a common. It's just a given. It's just a normal for them. So,
Okay.
right? I mean, now, but so it's something to consider.
Sure. Oh, okay. Well, then let's put it this way. If you're a believer, you'll believe that in the spirit world, cosmic supernaturalism, that the laws of physics don't apply.
True.
Now, having said that, when Hubbard's back into the material world with Xenu's DC-8s that don't have jet engines, they have, I'm assuming they're rocket propelled.
Wilby Was time drives.
He gives us a form factor, an exact form factor, which is a DC-8.
Okay.
So just begin from that. Now, these planets that have these massive populations, 178 billion people on average, they have to have much larger mass than Earth, because you'd have to have much more water, land for food. they'd have to be much larger and have much larger mass. So let's begin with the DC-8 form factor. And this is where we have to, like, if you're going to be a believer and believe in faster than light travel, then it's no problem. But in reality, my first question is escape velocity from Earth, as I say on my blog, is about 25,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
11.186 kilometers a second. So 25,000 miles an hour. The first point I make in my video is you can't accelerate a DC-8 airframe to 25,000 miles an hour.
It's true. And it's very interesting that you're raising this point, because just within the last week, I was watching an interview with Columbia University astronomer David Kipping, who he did an interview with Lex Friedman, right? And they were talking about the likelihood of, they're talking about many factors relating to alien civilizations and the possibility of them and whatever. And he said, Kipping said, on these super Earths, these massive Earths, they would have such a strong gravitational pull that even with a rocket fuel with as high a specific impulse as you could get, it would not actually be enough to overcome the gravity. You could not achieve orbital velocity on these massive Earths with rocket technology.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point you make, Aaron. You just couldn't, to get 25,000 miles an hour, you couldn't do it. That a commercial airliner would experience catastrophic structural failure at about 700 knots or above, right? It would start falling apart. So the G-forces you would need to escape from a very large planet, or even Earth itself. The point I wanted to make, first of all, is the DC-8 space plane couldn't achieve escape velocity.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You just cannot accelerate a vehicle designed like that to the speeds required to escape gravity of Earth, or any planet for that matter.
No, because the wings
Right.
would rip off below 1,000 miles an hour. The wings would just rip off.
Right.
At about, like I said, 700 knots or so. They would just rip off.
Right. So I want to jump in sort of to comment on what a Scientologist would probably be thinking about this, and then to tell them why they should stop thinking that. Okay.
Okay, good.
Because the Scientologist is immediately going to be going, L. Ron Hubbard is talking about advanced OT civilizations. OTs are superior to the physical universe. The laws of the physical universe don't apply. And I go, L. Ron Hubbard never said the Galactic Confederation was composed of OTs. L. Ron Hubbard never said Xenu was some sort of an OT. He was just a bad guy politician. He wasn't some advanced spiritual being. L. Ron Hubbard, when he's talking about the Xenu story, he's talking about just actual normal alien civilizations, not people who have control over matter, energy, space, and time. So that's all I wanted to say. So for a Scientologist to believe these stories, they'd have to stop thinking of like what an OT would be able to do, and they'd have to start thinking about reality.
Well, yeah, and Hubbard said that and by the way, I'm not David Crosby's ghost, but thank you. Rest in peace, David. It's an honor to be compared to that great man. I love his music. So someone makes a note, Ant Bear 13, to escape gravity, even the space shuttle couldn't handle that. Well, yeah, he makes an excellent point. So what Hubbard said of the civilizations is that they were very much like the 1950s. They wore the same clothes they wore in the 1950s. They drove the same cars.
Right.
So to drive the same cars, those were internal combustion cars in the 1950s. Hubbard didn't even specify Teslas, electric cars. He didn't.
You're right.
And so let's stick with the DC-8. Now, it couldn't achieve escape velocity. I made the point that 433 light years, let me get my slides, 433 light years. And this is why that's why I said Samuel Taylor Coleridge said that fiction is the willing suspension of disbelief. Well, it could just as easily be said that religion is the willing suspension of disbelief. I mean, that's not hard to go there. So let's start with another point. Hubbard said these were like humans. They were planets like Earth, so we assume there's people like Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that Xenu froze people. This is the second thing. When you freeze people, when you get frozen, the water expands when it's frozen, so your cells burst and you have massive cellular damage, would kill everyone. He also, as I made the point, Hubbard said that Xenu froze the people, not the spirits. He froze the people in a mixture of glycol and alcohol, which would be toxic and would kill you. If I immersed you in a vat of glycol and alcohol because of an evil space ruler, that would kill you alone. Or if I froze you, that would kill you.
But he wanted to kill them, right?
Well, no, he wanted to bring them to Earth to kill them. And see, this is the interesting thing. He didn't Xenu didn't kill the people on distant planets and trap them on electronic ribbons. He transported them to Earth. And so let's get into that, because that's interesting.
Well, short. Now, Jeff, I hate to keep interrupting you, but I want to give you some other thoughts here. Like the fact that that L. Ron Hubbard said Xenu set up a system to electronically capture the Thetans after their bodies died implies that Xenu knew everybody was Thetans. He didn't see everyone as physical bodies. So why would you go through all the trouble if you want to kill a few 100 trillion people? Why not just release them into the vacuum of space? Why fly them all the way to TGAC and blow them up in volcanoes? Like, right off the bat, it doesn't make sense. If you think people are spiritual beings, then why are you going through the trouble of transporting their bodies hundreds of light years? Like, if you can trap their Thetans electronically on Earth, why would you have to do it on Earth? Like, anyway, I just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
Well, that's a great question, because it would be a lot easier to so what Hubbard wants to do, I think he wants to localize the event here on this planet Earth, which is called TGAC, TEEGEEACK, TGAC. Learn some space opera. So I think he wants to localize it here on Earth because he has to have the body Thetan stick to people here on Earth.
Of course, yes.
And then
he
has to have this dramatic event. So he travels across the light years of the Imperium of space. And then this is just crazy. So let's jump around a little bit, because this is kind of just completely goofball engineering.
Yeah.
It's like a video game. It's kind of and there have been there's a column, an article on the internet comparing Scientology to video games.
Okay.
And it shows how Hubbard, has kind of the template of video games.
Okay.
That's a side thing. Okay, so first of all, the key point I make in my video is that Xenu had to use DC-8s to travel at the speed of light, faster than light speed or superluminal speeds, and that's a violation of the fundamental laws of physics. You can't accelerate mass to beyond the speed of light.
Sure.
Okay, you can't do that, especially if you're on 1950s type cars where you're wearing fedoras and using combustion engines. But so a lot of things don't add up. But so Hubbard's fleet moves at 6.87 light years a day. Like this, let me just give you the numbers real quick, Aaron.
Okay.
He said that Xenu's fleet came from the planet Coltus, which is near the North Star.
Do you know how he spelled it, by the way?
Coltus.
Is that a real star?
No, that's a planet, he said. A planet. Oh. Hubbard just made up a planet. He said they came.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. But is it spelled C-U-L-T?
No, I have it as C-O-L-T-U-S. Coltus.
Okay. Because okay.
Coltus.
All right, go ahead.
It's not Coitus either. It's Coltus.
All right. Keep going.
He said it's near the North Star. Okay. Hey, look, you can just make up planets as long as you're just.
Sure.
Hubbard, he could have named it, but he said the planet Coltus for some reason.
Sure.
So he said it's near the North Star. That's Polaris. That's 433 light years from Earth.
Okay.
Now let me give you that in a whole number. 2,545 trillion miles away. That's how much 433 light years. And he does that in 9 weeks or 63 days.
Okay.
So he has to travel at 6.87 light years per day.
Mm-hmm.
Where light itself can travel 16,094,798,000 miles in 24 hours. So he's going way with DC-8 space planes. He's violating the fundamental laws of physics. Okay. Now, So let's take that. Now the next problem we encounter. So let's just go like I say, let's just go along for the ride, okay? Let's be Scientology OTs at flag for a while and just go along for the ride. We're in the willing suspension of disbelief, right? The next engineering problem, Aaron, is you have to have these big gangly DC-8 space planes re-enter Earth. They're going faster than light, so they have to de-accelerate from light speed or way above light speed, superluminal speeds. You have to de-accelerate, and if you're moving at 6.87 light years a day, you have to slow down fast.
So usually the way spacecraft accelerate and decelerate is they spend the first half of the trip accelerating and the second half of the trip decelerating, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Xenu has to do something like that. But when the space shuttle re-enters, the bottom of it's coated with thermal tiles, and it does aerial braking where it trades. As it re-enters at a critical angle, the bottom of it's coated with the thermal tiles.
Yeah.
And so it's trading speed for heat. So in other words, the atmosphere is slowing it down. It's generating a lot of heat, which is why the space shuttle needs all those thermal tiles. Right. And even one chink in those thermal tiles, as we saw, would destroy the space shuttle, as it did tragically, twice. We lost 2 shuttles. But the DC-8 that Xenu had didn't have any thermal tiles. But the other point I make in the video, you can't take a DC-8 space frame, even space plane, and re-enter Earth. You can't do it. It would just rip it apart. It's not configured to re-enter at high speeds. It can't do it. It would fall apart. Yeah. But let's just assume that Xenu's DC-8s could violate the fundamental laws of physics, go faster than light, and then they could also escape from their home planets. They could achieve escape velocity. And what I say, and then they could re-enter. So what I say in my videos is Xenu's DC-8 space planes were special, and they could do this. Okay. Now the other problem, now they're packed full of thetans that are boxed up.
Is it thetans or is it bodies? Because I've never been clear on this.
Hubbard said that he placed them in boxes. Hubbard said that Xenu placed once Xenu's and I calculated the number, like you would need 41 billion DC-8 space planes if you took all 15.3 trillion.
But is he boxing up thetans or bodies?
I take it as bodies because he said he placed them. Okay, because you wouldn't. Here's the thing. If he had trapped thetans, then he wouldn't need to kill them to get the thetans. He said he placed them, and I'm taking that as people. He placed them in boxes and set the boxes on the principal volcanoes of Earth. Yeah. Which, as I point out, and as many others have before me, those volcanoes didn't exist 75 million years ago. So ignore geology. The volcanoes in Hawaii and Las Palmas and other places didn't exist. But anyway,
I just find it interesting. It never occurred to me until I was listening to your video today that I was like, wait a second. If Xenu had all these special contraptions set up to capture the thetans, then that means that civilization was a civilization that acknowledged and recognized the spiritual nature of life and believed that the spirit was immortal, therefore could survive body death. And yet Hubbard never describes this civilization as being a religious one, because also, but you'd have to be religious in order to believe in the immortal spiritual being, immortal spirit. And yet someone that believed in the immortal spirit, someone who was religious, would not seem likely to go want to blow up half the population in a volcano. And these are just questions that were going through my head as I was watching your video. And I'm like, oh, I never even thought about this part of it before.
Yeah. And that's why I'm breaking it down. I'm investigating it. Yeah. As an investigator and as someone with an engineering physics background. So I'm assuming they were actual bodies. Okay. Boxed up, frozen in alcohol glycol, and placed on. Hubbard said Xenu placed them on the volcanoes. But let me interject. There's boxed up thetans on DC-8 space planes, right? So these are cargo liners, freighter planes, right? Yeah. In order to do that, you have to land. You have to have landing strips on Earth to land the DC-8s and unload all the cargo. So you need ground handling equipment. That's the missing thing I spotted. Well, wait a minute.
Oh God, that's funny. Oh my God.
You have to land and you have to unload all the DC-8s. So you've got 41 billion DC-8s landing. So you have to have ground crews, trucks.
Okay. I'll just say that as the devil's advocate here, right? As Xenu's advocate, if you have DC-8 and DC-8 shaped space planes capable of faster than light travel, chances are they could hover right above the volcano and just push all the boxes out the back, maybe.
You know what? If it had hover capabilities, Hubbard didn't specify that, but I'm looking at it as an engineer because, again, my baseline given to me as an engineering type is exact copy. And a DC-8, exact copy of DC-8, a DC-8 had landing gear. So,
but a DC-8 also couldn't fly through space.
Yes. And so we're picking this apart. We're actually looking at what it would take to really do it.
Right.
Like,
right.
Because I even made a point that if you're going to have all these DC-8s, you actually have to build them back on the 76 Confederation planets.
Right.
You got to build all the planes. That means wiring harnesses, leading edges. And I made a joke about how you could get back ordered on aluminum ordering that many things. You know, if you're going to build 41 billion planes, you could get back ordered on aluminum from your suppliers. But of course, these are giant planets, so maybe they had that aluminum, or maybe they got a giant asteroid because there's an asteroid out there that's supposed to be worth what 10 times the economy of Earth, or 100 times the economy of Earth because it has so many rare minerals on it. They want to try to haul it in and mine it.
Jeff, I remember one thing you mentioned in your video because you were calculating how many space planes would it take to transport like half of 13 trillion people or whatever, and you said because it all had to be in one delivery because L. Ron Hubbard said it was one. Now, it occurred to me while I was watching your video that L. Ron Hubbard really only said it was 75 million years ago. He didn't necessarily say it was all in the same week. Could Xenu have done this over the period of a year or two? Since the trip only took 9 weeks, is it possible that maybe instead of needing like 2 billion space planes, he only needed, I don't know, 500 million?
Well, no, according to Hubbard's descriptions, this was a one and done.
Is that right?
Yeah, this was a one and done. I make the point that incident 2 of OT3, it was a one and done.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't, and what I did just as a thought exercise, I have a 1 cubic meter box for each person Xenu kidnapped, and he folds them. So you get the idea, like a person frozen in the middle of an ice cube, 1 cubic meter, right? Fold them up and put them in a 1 cubic meter box. And I'll post I'm gonna put this up so we have to have it. I was working with a high-powered engineer. We calculated 51.4 billion space planes to transport 13.538 trillion people from Earth, based on the cargo volume of DC-8 space planes, which is 9,300 cubic feet. Anyway, no, it's a one and done. And this is why, again, look, I'm the engineer on the ground. I got to get this done. So Xenu tells me, hey, we're going to do that, get it done. So I need logistics. I need to build the planes. I need propellant, drives, whatever kind of warp drives they had or whatever stuff. And we've got to unload them. So yeah, they could have hovered, but by whatever means, I think if they landed and unboxed them, had a ground crew stacking them on. And I make a point that if you have this trillions of people in boxes, it would exceed the landmass of the volcanoes to stack them.
That's
funny.
mean,
trillions. Think about it. You have to like build a pyramid to stack. And then if you're putting the boxes on the sides of the mountains, they would want to tumble down.
That's really funny.
So there's all kinds of stuff like, how do you actually do this? Because I'm always interested. How did they actually build the pyramids?
Right.
I'll interject for a minute.
Yeah.
How did they actually build the pyramids? We don't know altogether. Now, I'll tell you, I worked on a project with Caltech and Dr. Maureen Clemens, where she used a kite and a rig, and I was on the project we lifted an obelisk using a parasail, several tons. There's a clutch system and things. And that was an amazing project. So again, so Xenu had to get all the trillions of people here and unload them onto the volcanoes. And then Hubbard said that Xenu put H bombs around the volcanoes and blew everyone up. And that's where the bodies were killed. And then the Thetans were liberated from the bodies. And then that's where he caught them on electronic ribbons.
Right.
So that's why I
Amazing.
assume it was bodies transported, and he killed them here locally. He had to kill them on here locally. Because think about it, Aaron, I'll ask you a question. If you kill them on their home planets, then they'll never come to Earth to become BTs that need auditing at advanced organizations.
Well, unless they were killed there and then loaded, trapped in the glycol and loaded into the planes and transported to Earth after the fact, which would make more sense. But
it doesn't have the drama of killing them on Earth.
Yeah, it's true. Obviously, Hubbard, in order to sell Scientology to people living on Earth, had to create this space opera story that involved a massive incident occurring on Earth. So it is sort of this thing where, of course, it had to be that way. Of course, it had to be that way.
Well, look, let's just be evil space lords for a minute, Aaron. Let's say that there was a civilization on Mars, and we wanted to implant them, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're already overcrowded on this planet. It's just easier to go to Mars because, you know, like I make a point that Xenu left some people behind on his planets, if nothing else for guard duty to, you know, guard his planet so they're not stolen.
Yeah.
But it would make for really bad press to do the whole, you know, genocide there on your on your home planets. Hubbard likes it here localized. Just like if we were going to do something on Mars, we would do it on Mars. We wouldn't do it on our own, you know, turf, right?
Right.
So if we were evil space lords, we'd want to do the job on Mars and not here on Earth because it's a dirty job. And plus, we don't want the nuclear radiation here on our planet. So we weren't going to all the nuclear radiation. There you go. That's another reason.
There you go. That's another reason. Well, I'll tell you what, we've been talking about it for 42 minutes, but your original video is only 35 minutes long. So I want everyone to be able to go and see your video on it. Let me show everyone again, the Scientology Money Project channel. Again, it's really funny that your first video on the Scientology Money Project channel is a breakdown of Xenu and his space planes.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's something I always wanted to do. And just reverse engineer it, and could it really be done?
Yeah.
And it's fun to talk to you about, you know, when you have to go and actually do something, you actually have to engineer it. So that was my main point.
Totally. I think it's great. And I think it's something for Scientologists to think about and chew on because they are expected to take this story literally, even though I've spoken to many Scientologists who said that when they got onto OT3 and even beyond that on OT7, they say they never took it. They never actually believed it literally, but that's them taking liberty with what the heck was that? That's them taking a little bit of liberty. They are expected to believe it literally. So perhaps this will get some Scientologists thinking a little more critically about, maybe there's something more going on here than meets the eye. Maybe I shouldn't spend 15 years of my life trying to telepathically audit these body thetans that, technically speaking, shouldn't even exist based on L. Ron Hubbard's own story. So I think it's fun. I think it's fun to break this down in this way. And I encourage everybody to check out this video and subscribe to the Scientology Money Project channel. Jeff, thanks for joining me tonight. And let's do this again sometime soon.
Oh, yeah, Aaron, thank you for your support. Thank you for having me on. And I promise you, I'm going to do a next video explaining the real reasons why L. Ron Hubbard created the body thetans. And it's going to be mind-blowing because it's going to be even more interesting and sinister than how Xenu got them here.
Nice.
What I have to show next is going to be mind-blowing. You're going to go,
that's awesome.
This is why OT levels exist.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.